and thank you so much for tuning into TNT, the K-Cal Kids. I'm Ty Justice.
Todd Fox.
And we're coming to you talking about some of the greatest cartoons ever made since the creation of Saturday morning. Now, today we're going to start out with, of course, a Disney short, because that is our style.
Absolutely.
We may not always do Disney shorts, but for the most part, it just kind of fits. But they're definitely going to be classics that we start out with. And the one we're doing today is How to Play Baseball. And that is it. Now, did you get a chance to check that out?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, because I rewatched, we always try to rewatch what we're going to talk about. And that's a fun one from 42, it says. But like on the actual like title card, it says, I think 43.
Yeah.
So around 42, 43, this came out. And this is going to be the short that takes a humorous look at baseball. It does break down baseball pretty accurately, but there's also some fun, little exaggerations, especially when it comes to the illustrations. It's a Goofy short, of course, but it's of the era where Goofy was not voiced by Pinto Colvig. It was the how-to shorts kind of era.
He was like a silent character in all essence.
Yeah, he really was, and it was all narrated by the narrator, who was Fred Shields. Great voice.
Yeah,
and I think Goofy was voiced by George Johnson when there was any sounds of him doing anything wacky. But this was a Technicolor short distributed by RKO. Wartime, 7 minutes, and of course, it was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it was a classic. I mean, how it started out, I don't know what to call it with those little dots where they put it on the screen. It was more, it wasn't cartoonish. It was something else.
It was like the God view. Are you talking about?
Yeah, where it's overlooking
the
and they had the dots as the positions and stuff like that.
Right.
They were teaching you, but as they would say, okay, he pitches the ball, he does this. They do all these drawings and all.
Well, what do they call it today when they do the replays and they do the markers on the screen?
You know what? I don't know, but I do know it's usually with a finger or a pen. They're able to draw the play.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, they kind of.
Sure, someone will get it in the comments.
Exactly, but it's basically a God view of the baseball field and the individual players on the team, which were all technically played by Goofy. He played both sides.
Yeah,
when they
pretty
show
much.
him. But the dots represented who went where and what meant what, and it got really confusing on purpose, and it was fun.
It kind of screwed with you because to the layman at the time, you're like, wait, either, how is this how they play baseball? And then a true baseball fan at the time was like, dude, they're just totally trolling right now.
Right, exactly. And it was fun. It was fun the way they showed the American pastime of baseball, because I was looking at it in terms of the popularity of baseball. Everybody was playing baseball. The kids were, there was this slice of Americana, which, let's face it, honestly, a lot of that was probably propagandized in movies and TV, and on the radio, because a lot of people in 42 really weren't, actually, no, TV wasn't a thing then, it was radio.
Yeah. So
they were listening to baseball games, they were listening to the play-by-plays, so everybody kind of understood what was going on because everybody knew baseball.
Yeah, and what I loved about it that cartoon captured the era, the fans looking through the peephole. You had the wooden fences, the billboards everywhere, the chewing of the tobacco.
Right. And the baseball when Goofy just got him mixed up.
Yeah, he's like, I forgot what he was sweating or whatever. He's chewing the baseball instead of the tobacco. And then he's showing you how to proper pitch, and he's winding up doing all this crazy stuff, and then he goes to throw the ball, and it's going real super slow.
Right? Yeah, the curveball, the screwball, all this stuff, the different ball styles they had, or the pitching styles.
Pitching styles, yeah.
No, those were funny. And it was, we talked about this a few minutes ago, right before we were airing, and upon a second viewing, because I watched it twice again, just to make sure I didn't miss anything, it very much locks in that whole Americana, American spirit, American propaganda arm of Disney at the time. And, at the end, you have the flag waving beautifully in the air, and you have them talk about all-American sports, the all-American pastime, which baseball was. And it was a clever piece of Americana, and but at the same time, it was funny. It didn't hit you over the head with anything.
Yeah.
But that was there because it was during World War II. It's at the time where the War Department had kind of taken over Disney Studios, and they were kind of calling certain shots. But since Disney wasn't making a lot of money because the European market was cut off to him, which is why
take the propaganda.
Exactly, because the army paid. So, he was making money that way. It wasn't what he wanted because he didn't like to be out of control of his product. He wasn't someone that delegated that much.
Yeah.
So it was part of that. And it was also part of the era of shorts where I can understand why people would think this was the more homogenized or pasteurized, cleaner, simpler, easier version of Disney shorts. They were still good, but there wasn't that raw street level fire that they had in the 30s because they were also more comfortable. Like they were in the Burbank studios. So then those for the upper echelons of the artists who made enough money to be able to use the facilities, it was a much easier life.
Oh, yeah.
So you had much, and sometimes struggle, which they had in the Hyperion studio. Struggle kind of breeds creativity, and it makes gives you that fire, and I think they lost a bit of that. Though the 40s shorts were great, they were terrific, they just didn't have the same amount of explosive quality as Warner Brothers shorts did.
Yeah, the hits weren't. Warner Bros. Kind of took over that era.
Yeah.
With popularity and quality.
Yeah, and because they were called Termite Terrace, like the artists, they were like the Termite Terrace artists, and they were like elbow to elbow, and they were pranksters. There was less a sense of elitism at that point in the 40s, and they were still, Leon Schlesinger was very cheap, so he wasn't spending a penny more on anything, and they even made a Porky cartoon that made fun of that, and where he's actually in it in live action form. But they were going wild. You had Robert McKimson, you had Chuck Jones, you had Tex Avery, who was
famous Tex Avery,
technically fired from MGM at that time, or no, he's about fired from Warner Brothers before he went to other studios, but he got eventually fired because he was just nuts. But he put out great product. They all did. Disney did too, but they were much more structured in how they liked to handle things. But How to Play Baseball was, I don't think it was the first, because I think the Olympic one may have been first.
Yeah, I think the Olympic one or the workout one. Then you had football, you had hockey. They pretty much did all the sports.
All of them, yeah.
But in the baseball one, I want to touch on a couple scenes that I really liked in the cartoon. That was when, the pitcher got into trouble, and then he is biting the baseball instead of tobacco out of his,
chewing a chunk.
But then you had like scenes from you remember the Naked Gun? Mm-hmm. They copied that cartoon because in the cartoon, or Naked Gun did years later or decades later. Leslie Nielsen. Because in that cartoon, they're using the boat that they would use, the flash signal of a warship to signal another ship.
Right.
They used that in Naked Gun. And some of the scenes in the dugout by the worried manager was some of the scenes they used in Naked Gun. They recreated that.
I didn't know that.
And so in that cartoon, he's doing the signal. The bases are loaded. The base runners are running around, and he's as nervous as can be. And then the guy hits one, like a mile high into the air. And so the commentator's going crazy because the base runner is now running towards first base, and he can't believe he hit it. His cleat gets stuck on one of the bases.
Yep.
He's trying to run. The other runners are scoring. The ball gets hit so hard it opens up.
That's right, yeah.
And the strings and the little rubber ball that's in the middle comes down with all the string.
It all just kind of unravels in that whole thing.
And so he catches all the string in the ball, but it's not a true catch. So
and it buries him, I think, at first.
Yeah, so he has to pick up and start running with everything with one. He's tripping over the string. The base runner has he's picking up each base as he goes.
And they're trying to like wind up the ball again.
Yeah, at the same time. And so he gets all the way to home base, and then they touch home. They can't tell whether he's safe or out. And then finally the umpire makes a call. Then all the players come out there. They're arguing. They're bumping the ref. And then it's all chaos at the end. And it says, "This is America's pastime."
Yeah, and that's when the camera pans up.
The flag.
Tilts up to the flag. And it's an American pastime. And they just try to like cut away almost. We call it cutting away today.
It's such a mess. But I will tell you this. From that cartoon, Ty, that's when I first realized, okay, does a ball really have that much string in it? And does it have the rubber ball? So when I was playing baseball with my friends and one of the balls the stitching started to give way and it opened up right away, I went to that cartoon. I'm like, rip. And I started taking the ball apart. And then sure enough, all the same thing that was in the cartoon from the 40s was the same thing that I had decades later.
And your friends looking at you going, my ball.
Yeah, they're like, bro, you just killed our ball.
We can't play anymore.
I'm like, well, I'm not going to wind it back up.
I know, right? And then the camera tilted up to the flag right above you guys, and we cut. That's funny. That was a great one. Fun historical context when it comes fun historical context with this short is that The short was actually produced at the request of studio head Samuel Goldwyn, producer of many of the classic films like Stella Dallas from 1937, Wuthering Heights, a personal favorite of mine from 1939, Little Foxes with Bette Davis in 1941, along with many other classics. And it was the first to be shown with the 1942 feature film, The Pride of the Yankees, which is why Sam Goldwyn wanted Disney to make this for him. And that movie, of course, starred Gary Cooper about the life and career of famed Yankees baseball player Lou Gehrig, who died, of course, of Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. But it's funny how that would happen because, Sam Goldwyn was an independent producer. He wasn't like, his studio was significant, but he wasn't like Warner Brothers, Fox. He wasn't any of those big guys. And he was more along the lines of Disney in terms of how they produced, independent kind of, from your bootstraps up. And it's funny how films kind of sometimes try to match the cartoon with the feature. But for this one particularly, this was one that was asked of Disney to do for The Pride of the Yankees because everybody was really still broken up of Lou Gehrig and his struggles with his disease. And it's a fun compliment to such a serious, kind of sad movie, to be honest.
Yeah, between the changing of the guard of Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Mickey Mantle, there's a lot of famous Yankees, and baseball was huge, like you said, especially on the East Coast. And the West Coast, it was making its way over here later on, but people on the West Coast would listen to baseball on the East Coast. So it was, you're right. It was a thing to distract you from the war. You also had a lot of players in the war at the time too.
That's true. Yeah.
So there was this sense of community and stuff like that. So baseball was obviously held to a higher standard. So I could see why they did that.
And you particularly, I wanted to ask this question too because I didn't write it in the outline. But since you're big into sports and you work with the Angels, he works with the Angels, and he has a podcast that is about the after show or post game show. Sorry, it shows how much I
do interviews of players and stuff like that.
Yeah, he does some really fun stuff. And I wanted to ask you because of your involvement with that and your history with baseball. In terms of what football is today, and with football, of course, you have the commercials, you have sponsorship, halftime show. It's different. There are a lot of different features. But when it comes to the American pastime, at the time, in terms of how much people loved baseball in the 40s, in the 50s, and how big and iconic the players were, Babe Ruth, like I said, Mickey Mantle, was baseball bigger in terms of how much it was just purely loved for being baseball than the Super Bowl is today, the World Series versus the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the Super Bowl started getting popular with Joe Montana in the 80s, and then it was starting to really catch baseball. I think where baseball screwed up is they had everything working for them, and then the strike happens. They lost they had a season that was about 3/4 done, and you had some players that were going on to some record-breaking seasons, and some teams that, like literally a team in Montreal was deleted because they never recovered after the strike.
Wow.
Like they sold off all their players. They couldn't afford the downtime that they were done with. So baseball lost a World Series for the first time.
What year was this?
94.
Wow.
So you lost that entire season, and baseball tried to come back. It was falling into third place because the NBA had caught all kinds of fire with Jordan.
Yeah, the Bulls.
Jordan, the Bulls, and then you had Shaq and Kobe right after that. So they were bangers. So you had baseball for a long time in third place, and they tried to come back with the home runs with McGuire and Sosa. They broke the record. The problem is once all that cleared and people were starting to come back, and you had the steroids scandal that broke.
Yeah,
that hurt baseball. And so over the last, I would say 10 years I'd say 5 to 7 years, Ohtani, players like that coming around.
Oh, yeah.
And basketball fading away because these guys are making way too much money. They don't care about the fans. I know it's a long-winded answer, but
no.
I'm just giving you the background.
We'll get back to cartoons. This is interesting.
The NFL has been king this entire time, and they rack up the money. But baseball internationally has taken off. Like locally, regionally, the numbers are all up. The ratings are up. They're above basketball.
Wow.
Basketball continues to fade because they don't play defense, and it looks like they're not even trying. So that turns off people because they don't want to pay full price for a half-ass show.
Yeah.
So long story short, the NFL is still king. I think baseball just got above them, but they're in trouble because in 2027 there's a looming possible strike.
Oh,
And that would just set the game back way too far back. Because right now it's building. It's got a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
They have some things wrong with it, like the disparities between teams. Like the competition has to get better. Like there has to be an equal playing field. I think that's why everyone likes football, because any given year a team could go from last to first.
Right.
Whereas baseball's a lot harder to do that. Same thing with the NBA. You get the perennial winners instead of a new guy. I think people like seeing a new team ascend, a new city, stuff like that. So.
No, I love that. And my follow-up question is, do you think, I know this sounds just dumb, but let's face it, people watch the Super Bowl show a lot of time. Not everyone, but a good chunk will watch it for the halftime show for the celebrities.
And the commercials.
So without that, which baseball doesn't necessarily have.
No, yeah, because it's 7 games. Like I think that's why everyone likes it too, because like back in the day, boxing was so big because you'd say, oh, Tyson Holyfield, it's one night only. It's 10 rounds. Whoever wins, that's it. Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the NFL. And that's why it's king, because in a world where everyone wants results like this, maybe they can't wait a week to crown a champion. They want to crown a champion now.
Right.
And so that's why football is so, you play those weeks, whoever makes it to the playoffs, it's a one and done for everybody.
So do you think that if there was no halftime show, no cheerleaders, or if baseball started following those playbooks and somehow incorporated that into their lineups.
A one game?
Yeah, like a one game or a certain build up to that one thing. Do you think they would still be number one? If well, let's just do it the other way. What if football didn't have, because the halftime show before Michael Jackson actually was dying.
Oh, it was pretty dead. Yeah,
people would turn the station and not catch the end of the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and Michael Jackson brought that back.
The production and value is just off the charts.
Huge. So, do you think if football didn't have, and this is nothing against football, watch the Super Bowl, of course, but if they didn't have that, do you think baseball would have better numbers than football if there was no halftime show and there haven't been commercials and halftime shows building for the last 20, 30 years?
It's hard to say because of what they've built on a brand where the whole world seemingly watches, sort of like the World Cup. The World Cup's nothing's bigger than the World Cup.
Right.
But when it comes down to the Super Bowl, you'll get countries that don't watch football all year just tune in for that.
Yeah.
And it is a spectacle. It's a huge thing because in other countries they put their superstars, their people in commercials. So you get their side. You get the most they spend money. So it turns into this huge juggernaut. I will say though, when there is two very competitive basketball teams, two very good baseball teams, and they get to a game 7, winner take all, those get huge ratings other than maybe a series that ends in 5 or 6 games.
Right.
When it's all or nothing, either team can win. Oh yeah, people are tuned in.
Interesting.
But it just doesn't get those NFL numbers because NFL has been established and they really haven't gone through that strike season or a downtime, or they really they've had their troubles with the law with players, but they haven't had those huge scandals to where it's like, yeah, you kind of want to take a break from the NBA or you want to take a break from MLB. NFL's been consistent.
Yeah, maybe we'll do the how to play football goofy one soon, because that's a funny. I watched that just in case.
I just sports geeked a lot of people out of the cartoon.
No. I'm sure we got mixed. The fields are mixed sometimes.
Yeah.
But no, there's always some kind of connection. Yeah, this was one of the better ones. A lot of the how to with the goofies were actually really good. They were actually really funny. They followed a very simple format, but they really knocked it out of the ballpark. No pun intended.
Yeah. I mean, those cartoons are classic. I mean, they're, like you said, like with the one we talked about last episode with Mr. Walker. You turn these on, and these are how to. I mean, I've seen these at stadiums. When they say, hey, the rules of the game, just to put it on the jumbotron, it's on there, and no pun intended, they're goofing around on the jumbotron, showing old Goofy.
Oh, funny.
So you've seen stuff like that before, and it's pretty cool. I've seen it for other sports too. I've even been to an NFL stadium where they showed the football Goofy clip of the guy getting smashed between the two guys, and he's sort of like a T because his insides have been squeezed up into his head. Yeah, it's crazy.
So I wonder if they have to pay for those, or if they're just like, no one's going to find out.
Well, I mean, they don't use teams, or I mean, like
Disney. I wonder if they have to pay Disney.
Good question.
Well, because I mean, if they have to do with ABC or whatever station they're on, there has to be some kind of agreement to a
Yeah,
certain degree.
I would think so.
Because independent YouTube stations using a clip like that, like they're never going to get found out really. But when it comes to like big things like the NFL or something like that, Disney's going to find out.
Well, you know, I've always wondered that, and I had to do some research. But the Oregon Ducks, I don't know if you've seen the Oregon Ducks. Donald Duck is in their logo, like the actual Donald Duck. Like he's doing the fist thing coming out of the O, Oregon, and they wore that for years. But they're also owned by, I guess, one of their big alumni is the dude that runs Nike. So he does all their jerseys. They change their jerseys all the time. But the retro one that he likes the most is that Donald Duck. And so even on the newer, like Under Armour jerseys, he's got the patch of Donald Duck on the side.
Really? So they have to have a license.
They have to have I think I saw they had set up a deal with Disney years ago.
Interesting. Well, because like Felix the Cat is owned, but Felix the Cat is on like certain automotive companies.
Downtown,
yeah. You've seen that. Pink Panther, MetLife with the Peanuts characters. So there's some interesting deals that have been worked out over the years.
They'll lease them out.
Yeah, make some money. They don't need more though. I think those are long standing because that really doesn't happen these days. But no, it did. Everybody's so controlling of their IP, but because they make so much money.
But it's a great way to move your brand. I mean, if you're able to get a hold of one of those old cartoons and just boom. Yeah, for sure.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. But no, that was a classic. There are more of those goofy shorts to come because they are fun. Oh, they are good. But I didn't know that about Donald Duck. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll show you afterwards. Remind me. I'll show you.
Yeah, for sure. But the next segment, we're going to talk about a Saturday morning cartoon from the 80s. And now, growing up, I never watched this because it was on very briefly. And, sometimes you're just too young for certain things, even though it's close. Or you just don't remember them. But in 1988, the 50th anniversary of Superman, all things were happening. Like there were all a bunch of TV specials about Superman. Superman, The Quest for Peace had flopped the year before, but they were still amping up. Warner Brothers and DC Comics were amping up for the 50th anniversary of The Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And one of the things they worked on was Superman, the Ruby Spears TV show or animated cartoon for Saturday mornings. And I don't remember ever watching it. Did you ever see it at any point? Because I don't think it was ever reran either.
I did see a couple episodes of it, and it kind of reminded me of a very old drawings of He-Man.
Okay.
Like kind of like some of the characters, the bad guys reminded me of like He-Man type deal.
Yeah, because they had Darkseid, I think the Parademons maybe or something like that. Yeah, and they're big and bulky.
And one of the bad guys that was Superman, I forgot his name, but he had a weird looking face. He reminded me of one of the characters from Dick Tracy, the animated series.
Okay.
And so I thought that some of the same animators worked on this project as well.
Maybe.
But this one is interesting, Ty, because I think this was like a test to what Superman eventually became when they launched after Batman.
Oh, in the 90s.
Yeah, I think this was a test, and it was crudely drawn, if I could say that. Like there was
in comparison.
Yeah.
But a lot of the 80s shows kind of were, they almost seemed like there was a loose animation style. Because this was actually written by Marv Wolfman, who was a big wig in comic book writing at the time. He was like the guy in the modern age of comics that started like around 85, 86. And it was designed by...
You don't have this in your collection? They never...
They did. They finally released it in 06, which was another banner year because... In the Superman world, 2006 is when Superman Returns was coming out. And just like the 50th anniversary in 06, everything Superman was coming out on DVD. The Dean Cain, Lois and Clark series. I know there's a lot of controversy with that guy right now. Not my Superman. Also, they did like the George Reeves show on DVD and all that. But... that was like they were planning all the Superman serials came out that year. The first season of the Superboy live action show from the 80s, that was coming out. So, and the Ruby Spears Superman came out too, which was really cool. But the one cool thing about that show that I really liked, and they talk about it in a little documentary on that set, was they made Lex Luthor in that show. And in that era in the comics, he went from a mad scientist to a corporate billionaire. Like, he became corporate evil. And it was very 80s, but it's something that stuck with him. And he's always been this evil corporate billionaire ever since. And it made him an evil businessman, which somehow made him more realistic in many ways.
Yeah, because you can get that other kind of like scientist type deal, or you know, like it's I don't know. To me, like having an evil billionaire that could just like flip a, you know, like snap his fingers and have someone die, or just have like a ship bomb something or a plane. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like as far as
yeah.
a bad guy, you know, he's got, because that's why we love Batman too, because Batman's got unlimited money, unlimited weapons, technology. So this guy too,
Yeah.
same thing.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, exactly. He's evil Batman.
Yeah.
He's evil Bruce Wayne. And Gil Kane is the name I was looking for earlier, but Gil Kane was the artist that did the designs. He had a very sleek design when everything was still kind of like rounded off. He had like a tight design to his art. And though this show, the animation itself, he couldn't animate every frame, but from what he designed, he tried to make it very accurate to the comics. And the show itself was an amalgam of different things, because at the beginning they used the music and the emblems from the film, the advertising for the film, not the actual crest that Christopher Reeve wore, because advertising Superman crest and the crest he wore, which happens in a lot of superhero films. Batman Begins and the bat on his chest and the bat for advertising were a little different. Happens, but they did that with that one as well. And then the monologue comes from the George Reeves show from the 50s, that like faster than a speeding bullet and all this stuff. And you know, it's the theme is, of course, you know, the John Williams theme, but it's a little different as well. And this show is an interesting amalgam, trying to appease every generation of Superman fan until that day, which didn't quite work, which is unfortunate. And I don't know if you ever seen an episode?
Yeah, I've seen like one or two, but it's been years.
They're very simple.
Yeah.
And there's also half of an episode, and half of it is him on the farm, which is kind of interesting, being Superboy with the powers in like the first episode.
Origins.
Yeah, the origins, kind of not Smallville as much, but him just having the superpowers as a little kid, which, you know, they again, this was before the juggernaut of Batman the Animated Series and that team, though some people that worked on this, you know, transferred over. It really was trying, it was a weird transitional thing from Super Friends to being its own thing. And, you know, with Superman on the horizon, you know, like 8 years later, it just kind of like, it missed the mark of what it was trying to do, because you could kind of see what it was trying to do. But a lot of the episodes, there's still some corny exposition, corny dialogue. The Wonder Woman, I think, episode where she's in it, it's a little heavy-handed. You know, there wasn't a lot of nuance. They didn't reach that new era that Batman the Animated Series tapped into.
Yeah, I think it was at the time, I don't think people wanted that comic book feel. Like if they wanted to get a comic book cartoon or read a comic book, they'd read a comic book. I think they wanted something more sleek. Yeah. And I think that's why Batman and Superman, the New Adventures, took off, because it gave you a sleek new city. It gave you a sleek new look, a new interpretation on characters. It wasn't like the cookie cutter stuff. And like you said, that series, I heard the same thing when I watched a like brief synopsis of it, was it was all over the place. Yeah. So that's the problem too. I mean, you have to establish a character. I mean, you don't have to beat it into your head, but it has to be simplified, but also it has to, like you said, nuances or give you something unexpected. Yeah. And when everything's like cookie cutter, it's like you kind of lose people pretty quick.
No, it's true. And the one thing that Batman the Animated Series did, I know we're talking about it a lot, but it was based on, of course, the Fleischer cartoons from the 40s, but it made a choice. And that's a thing that this Ruby Spear Superman didn't do, because it was trying to appease everybody. And what happens when you try to please everybody?
You don't please nobody.
That's right. You please no one. So I think somebody...
choose a side!
Choose a side. I know this is controversial, but Cosby said this once. Bill Cosby said, sorry. But
after he put the person to sleep?
Right, exactly. He's talking to an unconscious victim. Which he may have done a lot. But he said, I don't know how to please everybody, but I know how to piss everybody off is by trying to please everyone. By trying to please everybody, you piss everybody off. And that's kind of what they did with that shoe. They didn't make a decision. And I think the bigger problem is, too, the comic book fandom at large would have accepted it if it didn't try to go off of the lighter aspects of the fandom. You know, Super Friends, the 60s Superman animated series.
Yeah.
You know, it was very light, and it didn't do what Batman the Animated Series did. Batman the Animated Series, you know, made bold choices, but it also respected the comics of the time, which were dark. And in 88, there had been this huge upheaval with Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics, and the modern era of comics, like again, started.
They
in
were
like
starting
85,
yeah.
86. So the avid comic book fans were just aware of what was going on in the comics, and it wasn't corny or campy or what had gone before, or them going, let's try a kids show. It was very of the time, so they didn't capture any of that, which of course disappointed their core base, which would have been the comic book people.
Well, that's the word that I got. I'm glad you brought up campy, because that's what I thought about Dick Tracy after watching the movie with Madonna, and then they came out with a cartoon. Instead of sticking to that dark, they drew the characters dark a little bit, but it was campy.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I'm like, dude, there's no violence in this. There's no, and like you said, dude, when I was getting into comics around 8, 9, 10 years old, really getting into them, it's like there was like that's where I read my first violent comic book was the Ninja Turtles, Eastman and Laird, the 86 version.
Yep.
I got it late, but I got it, and then everything I was reading after that, Spider-Man was already going full blood, things were crazy. They were introducing Venom and stuff like that.
And you had villains named Carnage.
Yeah, Carnage was on the was on the horizon, and then Superman, like crazy stuff was happening to him, like he's almost dying with kryptonite, or people were getting stabbed, and then Batman was Batman, dude, and
Superman was going to hell in some of the comics. It was crazy, but not in a funny way. It was dark.
Yeah, you had some really, really dark comics out there, and then these kind of cartoons came up, and I think that's why, getting back to your point, when Batman and Superman finally did hit out, they came out running, because like they tapped into the comic book, the dark comic books of the age. And I think that's the last bit of the 80s, along with the Ninja Turtles, was like the last bit of like that campiness, the kind of like, hey dude,
right,
like the
chill out, man.
Yeah, chill out, or hey, thank you, Batman, anytime, sir.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Gotta fly away. And that wasn't playing to the crowds anymore.
Well, we were talking about this earlier when you were talking about Transformers.
Yeah.
See, because even Transformers went dark. The Transformers movie from 86, right?
Yeah, they went from 0 to 60, dude.
I mean, your main characters all die in the first 20 minutes, for those who don't know. And it's pretty, even though it was like laser guns and all that, it was pretty graphic considering what it really was.
Yeah.
People getting shot in the head, begging for their life, Transformers, doing all that. It's intense, but like by that time in the late 80s, nobody wanted that anymore. I mean, you had your definite like Muppet Babies and things that were meant to be lighthearted and funny, but Superman wasn't going to be something that was accepted as that anymore, because in the comics, people could see, and in other action shows, action cartoons, kids knew, and teenagers and the comic book crowd and the enthusiasts, they knew what could be done.
Well, think about this, Ty, and I brought it up before, like that cartoon Heavy Metal.
Right.
Where you had sex in it, you had shootings, you had like straight up murder, just like aliens ripping the heads off. That was crazy. That came out in 89 to a soundtrack of heavy metal.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, you went from hair bands to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses was like the last bit of the hair band, but they turned into metal.
Yeah.
And so that whole scene of like was changing. The darker, the better. Yeah. The harder, the faster. It was going to work for cartoons too.
Right.
It
had to.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when we talked about like, KCal and Disney, like they were still holding on with the regular Disney stuff, but they were putting together stories. But if you wanted to do comics or action figure type things, you had to go to the next level.
Right.
It couldn't be cookie cutter. G.I. Joe too.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe for a war cartoon. Yeah. And like your boy brought up, for a war cartoon, it was very, very campy.
A friend of mine was here. We were talking about this before we started shooting. Yeah, it was. And the interesting thing is, though, it's not like the brakes were taken off. Like, it wasn't like the training wheels were taken off and the studios were like, no, let's be ultra violent and dark. They still had a lot of regulatory things that they had to watch. And there's a book called the Batman book, or the Batman animated series book. And I love that thing, and it's hard to find, but in it, the creators of the show talk about the production of Batman the Animated Series and all the things they had to go through. Like, you couldn't say, because they wrote it as dark as they could, and their original concepts were much darker, and they made a drawing out of it that's fun, that was kind of comical, but they showed all the things they couldn't say, see you in hell, and all this stuff. So they had a lot of regulations on them, but they still kept a very uniform style, which helped them, and they had clear ideas of what they wanted to do.
I can't wait to get into that series.
Oh yeah, that's in the next few episodes. We're going to start getting dark into the Dark Knight and Batman Batman the Animated Series, and the whole, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini world. But the funny thing is Superman, and I'll do a lineup. I'll put the credits and up everything after. I'll put the credits up after.
It's an interesting show for sure.
It was interesting because it was transitional, but it was the last time that audiences really, or like cartoon audiences, were going to accept such a soft superhero show.
They were the hairband.
Right. They were the last hairband. Yeah,
exactly.
That's right. Of animated series. And it's unfortunate because, it was Superman's 50th anniversary. I'm a huge Superman fan. For those who are just listening, I'm a huge Superman fan. I have a poster on the set.
Stump Tyrone with Superman, and believe me, you'll get a super prize, because I don't think you can.
You probably will. I mean,
I doubt it, bro.
But no, I love the Superman films were my thing, and I love all that. But the show, you see what they did, and it was the 50th anniversary. They were trying to go out big. They were trying to do something because, Superman 87, Superman 4 did not do well, unfortunately. But but the funny thing is, a lot of the quotes that they quote from those films are from the fourth film, because there's some really good dialogue in it. But that could have been such a great adaptation. I mean, Gil Kane, the artist, he was a dynamic artist. Marv Wolfman, who was like heavy in the comics as a writer, and they still fell short.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but they brought a lot of his villains from the comics into this one, right?
Yeah.
They had several.
They tried to, yeah. It wasn't just like, some thing like in The Flash in 1990, the live action show. He had basically none of his comic book villains, except for like toward the end they started doing it, but it was kind of too late. But great show, by the way. But with Superman, in this one they started bringing a lot of the characters, not just Lex Luthor. And a shout out to Terrence Stamp, who just passed away, who was General Zod, 87 years old. Speaking of Superman villains, one of the greatest.
That's right, I heard about that.
Poor guy. But in this animated series, they did try to do that, which was fun, but it still wasn't enough, because audiences in the late 80s were starting to mature. And I mean that not just that they were getting older, but there was so much happening in the world that, you needed something different. Because Super Friends had been around for 20 years at that point.
Yeah.
Same style. And people kids had enough of that. And people growing up had enough of it and wanted something different and just better.
Well, think about it, too. I mean, we talked about music earlier, too. Yeah. I mean, think about video games were just hitting their prime between 86 and 94. You had all the systems coming in, but at this time, you're fighting regular Nintendo, Super Nintendo. Is right there. So, things are changing, like the Saturday morning cartoons are now having to deal with video games.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there's a lot that these cartoons went up against. And this is another one where, again, the other shows that were on at this time, Ty, as well. I mean, again, where the comic book genre is now and being so mainstream wasn't so that back then. You had your people that liked it. But the vast majority wasn't really mainstream. And you knew of Superman, but the cartoon aspect had to start over. They had to find its way.
Yeah, the popularity.
Yeah.
So, but Superman was one of those things where, like, it's Superman. He was like one of the most recognizable.
Well, yeah, it had the name,
especially after the movies. But still, you can't just write on that, and that's what that show proved. And you had to have good quality storytelling, but adult storytelling for kids, and if that makes sense, you had to have storytelling that was mature enough, not overboard or too explicit. But you had to. The show, I think, still suffered what some shows like that did suffer from, which was talking down to their audience. Yeah. And even though they were trying not to, I think it still fell victim to that a little bit. They're like, this is for kids. And that's probably not Marv Wolfman. That's probably not Gil Kane. That probably had nothing to do with them. I'm sure it didn't. But it has to do with the studio heads not really understanding their audience.
Yeah, and then pushing the fact that, okay, our sponsor maybe is a cereal. And
right.
They don't like that kind of talk. Tone it down a little bit. Maybe Superman doesn't have to knock the hell out of that guy.
Right. Well, that's what happened to, if you ever remember the George Reeves series, that's what happened to them, because the first 2 seasons are in black and white, and those episodes were well written. They weren't just like written for children, but once they went into color in 1953, Kellogg's took over, or a cereal company took over, and that's why everything went to color. Years, like a decade before color TVs were really a thing, before TV actually ever went to color. It's a fun little tidbit. But at the same time, they toned it down so much, and it became the campy show that it became. Yeah. But there are episodes of the second season specifically. There's one where he has to save a guy from getting the electric chair for murder or something like that. And it was a really tense show. And I watched it because, in 2006, I started collecting a lot of the stuff on DVD when they started first putting it out. and because it was Superman. And yeah, and I never grew up with them, but watching that, the first 2 seasons had really well-written shows, and they didn't really get corny until it went to color for kids. But like you said, because of the sponsors. And it's funny because the opposite used to happen with cartoons in the 60s, because the Flintstones was developed by Philip Morris. No, not Philip Morris, another cigarette company. And, they had them commercials with them smoking. So they were ultra dark back then.
Oh, yeah.
But in the 80s, it was all about selling toys and products. It was much different. You're right.
Yeah. I can't imagine cartoons selling cigarettes nowadays, but
they had actual Flintstone commercials for cigarettes.
Barney
and just smoking one of them is a really sexist commercial because Barney's telling Fred when he watches the girls, their wives like cooking, cleaning and stuff. He's like, I can't watch the girls do this. Let's go behind the garage. And they go behind the garage and start smoking. It's hilarious. It's completely inappropriate, but very, very interesting. But it was a different era, and unfortunately, after 13 episodes, I think that was it for this show.
Yeah,
and it's sad for the actors, because it would have been really good for them if the show did continue on. But the one great thing about that show, that it was the first portrayal of Lex Luthor as a corporate villain, and like we said before, much more realistic. And it's something that, it suited that era of greed is good, Gordon Gekko. And, it really just kind of took from that. And I think that's the one great thing it did. It gave us a visual of Lex Luthor as, he's kind of still talk like this, like a corny villain. But, just the imagery of him being a wealthy industrialist who is just, universally hated, just kind of fits today. Because if you think about it, Jeff Bezos kind of looks like Lex Luthor. Anyway,
he could pull it off.
I'm telling you, not just the look, but being a horrible human being. Anyway,
he'll kill his people by sending Amazon packages.
Exactly, with kryptonite in there.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Like, how does Superman
kryptonite
die?
again?
I know. Stop sending me this crap, Superman says to Lex. But it was an unfortunate casualty. But they were trying in that year to do so much. And unfortunately, that show did not survive. But thanks to DVD and home video, it is out there forever. And with the internet, it's the same thing. It's out there and it won't go away. But it was always something I read about in the Superman books. But since I couldn't get a hold of it, I'd never watched an episode. So when the DVDs came out, I finally got to see it. I'm like, oh, okay. That's why it failed. Unfortunately.
Because not only do you realize how it was probably received at the time it came out, but then you can also see, man, dude, far and away they improved years later.
Yeah, so. It's amazing. Well, and it's funny, we talked about this a minute ago, but like kids were watching so many other things. Kids were also watching like Gremlins and Ghostbusters and all this like stuff that was kind of horror comedy. So they were much more advanced at that point.
Addams Family.
Yeah.
You had what was the other one? Beetlejuice. So there's a lot, because they made a cartoon of that one too. There was a lot of like dark.
I have that show. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That one always trips me out. That's a trippy cartoon. We should talk about that one too one day.
I used to have to jump back because I used to stay with my grandmother after school, so I would have to choose very religious type, let's say. But I'd have to have my thumb on the jump button and jump back and forth. Warner Brothers cartoons, Beetlejuice. So I said it 3 times. But I'd have to jump back and forth, so I had to always have the remote in my hand getting ready to jump. I'm sure there are no other kids that went through that growing up.
No.
But I remember that specifically for that. I think we will talk about that because that was a trippy show, and I do need to revisit that. But also, in the 80s, you had toys based on RoboCop. You had cartoons based on RoboCop, video games based on one of the bloodiest movies that were out there.
Bloodiest ones I seen too, growing up. I mean,
you saw RoboCop.
I still remember one of the opening scenes where that machine blows off his kneecaps and crap. I'm like, holy,
it got an X rating there's an X-rated cut out there just with more violence because it was Paul Verhoeven's way of, just making fun of American violence in films. But kids were watching that.
Yeah.
So that's why Superman didn't fly. Pardon the pun. But that's funny. But it was an interesting era, and it was interesting what was made for kids and what was given to kids as consumable content, and why something like Superman just wasn't, the Ruby Spears Superman just wasn't taken seriously.
And that was the thing too. Like if you look at Superman too, like the way they evolved drawing him and the way he would fight villains. Like, okay, if he's gonna fight a robber and then punch a robber, his face should be demolished. It should be incinerated. Yeah. If you're really Superman, you're gonna kill somebody with a straight punch. So that's why if he's going up against robots or aliens or freaking out of this universe type characters, then it fits.
Right.
It fits when you're getting into an intergalactic fight or someone with superhuman strength as well.
Yeah.
But when in these campy cartoons, when they're hitting regular Joes, and it's like, okay, he knocked one out, but it's like, he's Superman. That should have killed him.
Well, especially in that era, because soon after that, they were around that time, or right after that, is when they were preparing the death of Superman, and that's what got me into comic books and really got me into Superman comics. It was around that time, and the joke was, how do you? It was hard to write for Superman because he got so powerful in the comics that it was like, how do you hurt a guy who can destroy the world by listening too hard, which was an actual thing in the comics. So the success of later adaptations of Superman or later iterations like the Bruce Timm Paul Dini Superman was the fact that they pared down his powers, and they purposely did that. They're like, we did that on purpose because it makes a much more interesting character than someone who is completely invulnerable and you can't hurt him.
Yeah, you need some weakness. You need some character building. You need You need your hero
hurt.
And how do you recover? How do you go about doing it? That's part of the story. I think what's lost too, why a lot of people don't like a lot of the new IPs, is like they just throw a character out there and be like, he or she's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like no. You need to have a good story building pursuit when you're watching, because it keeps the listener or the watcher or the reader involved, because you want to see how are they going to get through this.
And you're worried for them. Like, are they going to get beat? Is it they're going to lose this? It may not happen.
What's at stake?
Exactly. The stakes.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. That's exactly true. But not soon after that, we had a Disney adaptation from the Disney block that I think we should talk about.
Let's do it.
It's a callback to two cute little characters, characters that ended up being Chip and Dale and their Rescue Rangers. Again, we've talked about this being part of the Disney block and how Disney did well in the late 80s, early 90s to, have the callbacks to old characters, their old IP, as we say. Older characters brought into newer situations. And one of the greatest things, let me just start out by saying, one of the greatest things about these shows, about the Disney block, was the music. They're not only the show music inside the show, but the theme songs.
Intros.
They really went hardcore with these intros to make them a hook.
Absolutely.
And to this day, when those come on, you just can't help, if you grew up with it, but sing along, because there's such good songs. Because DuckTales, I think we talked about, the guy was a rocker, and he's like, it's so, because he became kind of popular on TikTok again, singing the song, going like, when you're a rocker, you want to be a rock star, and you're known for this kids show, he did and he sang the whole song. It's kind of embarrassing, but he's learned to embrace it and love it over time. But Rescue Rangers also had a great song, and this was like really good like singable music.
Yeah, it's like Rescue Ranger, Chip and Dale.
Rescue Rangers.
Yeah, it was really cool because they fought for the little guy. That was that was their whole thing.
Yep.
What I liked about it, Ty, I don't know if you got the same vibe out of it as me, because like knowing Chip and Dale from the original cartoons, it was like, okay, like you had brought it up and I didn't even think about it, how Magnum PI was like Dale, like you said, and then Chip was what is it called, the other character,
Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Two very popular franchises at the time.
Exactly. And then you add Gidget, or it's a Gadget. Gadget. Yeah, Gadget. And she was like the one that worked on things. And then you had the Muscle, which was a
Monterey Jack.
Yep.
Like
and then you had the Fly.
The Fly.
But
Zipper.
Yeah.
Zipper. Yeah. Oh,
who never said anything.
Right.
Yeah.
He was mute.
But the thing I liked about it was I kind of got the vibe outside of Zipper. Like it kind of felt like the A-Team.
Yes. I never thought about that, but you're right.
It kind of felt like the A-Team.
Also a very popular franchise at the time.
Yeah.
I can imagine the pitch meeting, like Magnum PI meets Indiana Jones meets the A-Team meets Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers.
With a fly.
And like, how much cocaine have you done before you came for this meeting?
Give me some.
It'll probably be out on the table. But no, I never thought about that, but that's true. And another aspect too is how kind of female forward this was, because Gadget, I keep calling her Gadget.
Yeah, I keep thinking
Gadget, she was great. She was this, she was the love interest. Of course the boys would have a crush on her, and she's drawn real pretty, but she was smart. She was the mechanic. She's the reason they had their gear and all their she was like their Q in James Bond. And she was brilliant. So, I think that show kind of had a leg up in a way when it came to female characters. But yeah, that's funny. It was a great team, but they had a lot of good forward thinking and a little bit of feminism in there. It was really cool.
And yeah, that part, and I like the fact that Monterey Jack had that distinctive accent, and he would call Gadget love.
Oh, he's Australian.
Yeah. And so he had that like really, really cool accent. He would talk to people like he was mean when he had to be. He would go berserk with cheese, right?
Yeah, it would drive him nuts, right?
Yeah,
He was like an addict.
His eyes would flip,
because cocaine was also a very big thing in that era.
Yeah, when they needed to get out of a jam, it's like they gave him cheese,
like Popeye and spinach.
Yeah, and he would break through things, go crazy,
right.
beat up on the bad guy.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah,
that was trippy. Yeah, that was a good show, and it really, and again, some of my favorite Chip and Dale scenes were, of the original shorts. One of them we've talked about before, and we'll probably talk about it as a short because I always love that one too. Was Out of Scale.
Yeah, it's a great
with
one.
Donald Duck.
My dad's favorite cartoon for obvious reasons.
It was because his dad is a huge train enthusiast.
Yeah,
and that's right. That's a good one. But no, it was really cute. It was a great short, but. Chip and Dale were troublemakers. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Shorts. They were antagonists. They would antagonize Donald, but Donald was too. Out of Scale, I think he actually started it.
Yeah, Out of Scale. It's so funny because he's actually playing along with it, and like, he's hooking him up with like pajamas, and
he put him in this really cute, and maybe that's why it appeals to us so much because in that one. He had everything. He had model homes, a model train. He had everything to scale. That's why it's called Out of Scale. And they were the perfect scale because he measured them for his little his model homes.
Yeah, for him to live there and watch. So as he's running the trains, he's watching them.
Yeah,
and then
the devilish part of him comes in and he starts to torture them. Little punk. That's right.
It starts with the weather and messing with Dale. Yeah. It's hilarious.
Oh my God. That was a really good one. I do remember that. And the funny thing about Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, as a kid, I always liked never had enough money growing up for like the play sets, and everything they played in felt like a play set because they were in their tree. They had makeshift little zeppelins and ships and planes that they would make out of spare parts.
Yeah,
and that was really cute. It was ingenious.
And I like too the fact that like with every good video game at the time too, that it played off a cartoon like that made into a really good video game. I remember having
Chip and Dale's, they did.
Rescue Rangers 1 and 2.
That's right.
Me and my friends would play it. It was actually a 2-player game. Not the best 2-player game. I preferred to play 1-player, but it was fun because it's like, okay, I remember that episode, and they stuck to the storyline, and I liked it. And the overall premise of the cartoon was pretty cool too. It kept you intrigued, and like you said, the outro and the intro music,
really good,
and the leather R&R. At the bend with the lightning bolt.
The emblem,
it was pretty cool.
That was really good. That was that was very detailed.
Yeah, super detailed. So that cartoon again was a little bit ahead of its time. The jokes were funny. Dale was always like the guy, the goofy one that got into trouble, and then Chip was always like leader, serious. Yeah. So it was really cool, man. And it had some pretty good villains too. So you had a pretty good premise, a good show, and that's what you wanted in that time period, man.
Yeah, and it lasted for a little while. Let me see. It started in September '89, and it lasted until November 1990, and in that time they did 3 seasons because remember the way but the way that shows worked back then, animated shows like He-Man, Transformers, that's why like the DVD sets were always like multiple volumes of the first season, sometimes 3, because shows would automatically want to hit syndication once they aired. So like anything for Disney, all the first seasons were all 65 episodes because 65 episodes automatically meant you had a syndication package. You were put into reruns. They'd run you for 13 weeks, and then if if they wanted to, they'd run it for another 13 weeks. So they would have their package done. If a show did exceptionally well, they would do multiple seasons. But those other seasons would only be a couple episodes, like 10 episodes, 10 more. They weren't going to put too much out because they were afraid of diminishing returns. But this one made it to 3 seasons, but it got to its syndication package of 65 episodes.
Yeah, and think about this too. I mean, it was in regular rotation and syndication till about 95, right?
Yeah, probably around there. At least on network TV. It
probably
network. Went to cable after that.
Or went to Disney. I know it went to Disney because Disney tried to recreate that as far as like, watch the Disney Channel. We have the Disney block. And so they try to recreate that. I think in the late 90s to early 2000s.
Yeah.
They brought a lot of the old school and they try to mix in some of the newer shows with it.
Yeah.
but I do remember it was off the air for a good little while. But it did, yeah. And that was the thing I didn't understand back in the day. We didn't have internet or stuff like that. So when we talked about DuckTales on the last show, and we talked about this one, you know, yeah, they would come up with 2 or 3 seasons. You'd get a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, it just stopped. And all of a sudden, you're going back to watching the first season, or maybe going into the middle of second season. You're like, what the hell? When are they going to bring in another season? They never explained that.
No. And
they left you hanging.
No, because they weren't thinking of it in terms of story. Not really the producers of the studios weren't thinking of it that way. They were doing like, let's do what we can, get into reruns, and be done with it. They didn't go like, well, it's doing really well. Maybe we should, have, because they were not serialized, but they were episodic. So every episode was one thing, and then they move on to something else. Sometimes they had multiple parters, like 2-part episodes, but for the most part, it was just one and done every time.
Well, let me ask you this then, because this is a question I think you're the perfect one to ask for this.
Sure.
So let's just say that they thought about how SpongeBob is nowadays, to where he's on like season 20 or whatever like that. But let's just say a cartoon series, usually if it's a good one, can go up to 7 to 8 seasons, unless it's something special like Family Guy, SpongeBob, Simpsons. Right. But which of the KCal block of cartoons you think could have had the longest longevity as far as episodes and seasons? If they were to do it back then how they do cartoons nowadays, which one do you think would have had the longest run, in your opinion?
Of the major 4?
Yes.
They're also similar, but the only one that sticks out to me in terms of that, if they weren't going to go back to original comics and it was just original storytelling, original writing, I think it would be Darkwing Duck. Only because with Darkwing Duck, you had such colorful villains, and it was such a throwback, or it was such a call out to Batman. I think that could have kept going, because that show did have darker moments, and their characters were pretty sadistic, the villains. So, I mean, in my opinion, I would say that. All of these kind of had the potential, but again, what it has to boil down to is merchandising and advertising.
True.
If your show keeps bringing in merchandising and advertising, look at the Pixar films. What do you have the most of in all of their films? It's the Cars films. Are they the better films? Heck no. If it goes by what film was the best film, at least in my opinion, it would have been Incredibles. We would have had 8 of those by now.
Yeah.
But they do it in terms of how many toys they can sell. And the only reason they kept the Cars movies, the Planes movies going for as long as they did was because of the toys. Those doggone toys sold like crazy.
Toy Story 2.
Toy Story 2. And Toy Story, the things with Toy Story, though, that was a good movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And the third one is where it should have ended.
Should have stopped.
Yeah, because the fourth one, it's like, because it was so emotionally gripping, you were never going to be able to top that.
Yeah, it was the bow was tied. Everything was
Perfect.
shipped. It was shipped away to the person it was intended to. It was good
because it was our era. They made it for us. You know, so when it ended, it was the end of that childhood era, and it was perfect.
Well, yeah, the ending of that movie to me got me, because I was in that moment of giving my toys to my kids.
Yeah.
And turning them over and being like, I had a whole thing of Hot Wheels that I played with that my mom bought me. And I turned that over to my nephew at the time. So I had that moment on several different occasions, giving them either to nieces or nephews or my own daughters. Yeah. But when I gave it, to my nephew, when he gave that box in the movie, I pictured me giving that to my nephew. And how I did choke up a little bit, because I had so much fun with these cars. I had imagination just like the boy did. Yeah. So yeah. So when I gave that, I was like, oh my God, that's me. So yeah. you feel that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think, a lot of these films, a lot of these shows, could have, and they could have gone on for a long time, but just like, the funny thing was, like I've mentioned before, the redo of DuckTales. Yeah. And the reimagining. I love that, because now it's done with a more modern sensibility. Forget that the art's different. We get it. That has to happen. It doesn't have to happen, but it happens. Yeah. But it was a great retelling, and they ended it. That's another thing that our shows never had, was a concrete end.
True ending.
They didn't care about that.
Yeah, that's the sad thing.
The studios just wanted to make as much money, put it into syndication, and be done with it. They didn't have to worry about treating it like a real show. Casting directors that I've worked with didn't consider voice acting, even a few years ago, real acting. They're like, oh yeah, voice stuff, it's not real acting. And he was talking about big stars. This one casting director for General Hospital, he was telling me that, he was talking about big stars who had voiced Ma Kent in Superman the Animated Series. Like, oh yeah, Shelley Fabre. And he's like, oh yeah, she worked that, because I was talking about that, because I love talking about those shows. And he was like, oh yeah, she between real acting gigs, she did that. I'm like, dude, that is real acting. Are you kidding me? But again, not a lot of respect, even from the higher ups. not to give it, because they're like, kids don't care about a show ending and giving them closure and anything like that. That was at most for animated movies. It wasn't for shows. So it wasn't until even Batman the Animated Series and Superman didn't get those. Batman Beyond, I think, was the first time that ever happened, because Batman Beyond, the third season, was they were promised a full 26 episode run, but when they got halfway through the first season, Warner Brothers goes like, yeah, you're canceled. So the same people, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, they all went into the Justice League show, right? Justice League and then Justice League Unlimited. But what they did every season, for those who don't know, is they made every season a series finale. That's why every season had huge explosive endings and arcs and all this, because they weren't sure that they were going to get an end, and they wanted to end these things because they grew up the same way we did without having an ending. And they wrote on, and a lot of the guys from Batman the Animated Series wrote for Tiny Toons and Animaniacs and all these shows that never got an ending.
Boy, see, and that's the thing that you bring up. I would have loved to have had an ending for Tiny Toons. I know that they fooled around with possibly making them, continuing them. Yeah. I don't think they did.
They did TV specials, but that was during the time. And they really didn't move on with it.
And the Animaniacs, I know they recreated it, but they didn't have all the characters. They didn't have the voiceovers. There was a lot of contract stuff. Those are the type of shows that could have kept going because they fed off of pop culture,
right,
and the latest things that were happening. So like I could see those go, but yeah, I mean, so many cartoons that we grew up with, would have been nice to get that fairy tale ending, or like Rugrats got a pretty damn good ending.
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
well, did you see what they did for Batman Beyond? You've watched the Justice League.
Yes, I have.
So because they ended that season 1 episode early, so they could actually go back and do what they originally planned and actually give a series finale to Batman Beyond. But, these are guys like us. They want the same things. And I think those shows that we grew up with, Rescue Rangers and all that, they gave them a movie, which kind of tied up a lot of loose ends.
But then
which was kind of weird. But
gave you some head scratchers, too.
Right, yeah, exactly. It was so weird, but I'm glad they did it. They did it.
It was pretty cool.
But it got something at least. But the animated shows now, that's why I'm not as anti-reboot as I used to be. Because I'm like, leave the originals alone. You guys are crazy. You're going to ruin it. Which sometimes they do. Most of the times companies do. But the great thing about what they're doing with what they did with the DuckTales show gives me hope that the rumors of a Darkwing Duck spinoff, because I think he had a cameo on that, it gives me hope that that's going to be good and they're going to give it something cool. And the same thing with the rest of the block, that they can kind of like pay homage to the originals, but at the same time introduce it to a new audience,
reimagine it,
and do it in a way that kind of pleases everybody. That's kind of how you do it. But you take what came, you respect it. You take what came before, you respect it. You give it some new packaging. You do some fun stuff with it. But that's the key word. Do they respect the IP? Yeah. Are you going to get someone behind it that was as passionate, or at least knows the content, to take it to that next level? And then, like you said, pay homage. Yeah.
Because I think that's what kills a lot of people when they do these IPs and they just don't want to follow the new stuff, because it's like, well, that's not my character, or that's not my character, because
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna do this. Who cares what came before? Seth Rogen did that with the Green Hornet, and that's why that movie failed. They're like, don't make it a dumb comedy. It's like, who the F even cares? Remembers what the Green Hornet, and it just ruined the film.
Yeah, but absolutely.
I get you. It's true.
Yeah, and that's what you have to take it seriously. You got to know the source material. So I'm glad DuckTales did a good job, but for every DuckTales, there's like 2 or 3 that haven't been redone good. So that's the hope moving forward, because I'm becoming more and more a Disney guy again, because, my girl's like, she's big time into Disney, and we go a lot and stuff like that. And I see the joy in kids, and I know that the cartoon era will never be as good as it was when we watched. But
as every generation thinks,
yeah,
but it's true in our case.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're able to reimagine DuckTales and get a whole new generation like they did, if you're able to get people back into Chippendales, because nothing made me happier than to see people wearing Dell jerseys or Dell shirts, and Chip and Dale and Rescue Rangers gear, and it's like, I want to see more of that at the parks, because I know if that's at the parks, it's on TV, it's other places.
Yeah,
and I want to see more of that, and that's pretty cool. But only time will tell. But yeah, I mean, there's just no replacing that block of cartoons when we watched, and would we have loved to have had a finale? Hell yeah, but it didn't happen, and it kind of gets you
thinking about the what ifs.
Yeah, the what ifs.
But there's still, because of what they did with DuckTales, I think there's a chance that might happen with these shows. Because I think there was a Tailspin cameo in there. They did a lot of cameos from the block in that show, in the DuckTales show. And with Rescue Rangers, it was a weird thing because Disney really doesn't put those out on disc anymore, of any kind. And they finally completed them on DVD, and that was it. Rescue Rangers actually got a Blu-ray release.
Wow.
I have it. No special features, of course. It's bare bones, but it was just an odd move because it was like 2 years ago. I think they did that, or around that time, or last year. And I just saw that. I go, what is this? I go, is this a bootleg? Because I have like a bootleg of Recess because they didn't. Put
That's
them
another
out.
great cartoon.
It's another great show.
That's a great cartoon
based on classic films, but. That Rescue Rangers, I saw at Amoeba Music in Hollywood, and I go, what? And that wasn't even on my bingo card. My
that's
home
gone
video
too.
card.
That was a great place.
Yeah, and well, they moved it. It's in Hollywood off of Hollywood Boulevard now.
Okay.
But the old location, that was great.
Yeah,
the new one's smaller, but I actually got this at the new location. But I was shocked. I go, why would they do that? And then I'm like, well, maybe they'll put DuckTales out. Meaning because they remastered them and they look great. So now I'm like, well, are they going to do the rest of them that way? I mean, I hope so. But I'm like, does that mean that they're trying to see if there's an audience for this so they can do like a remake?
That's possibly how they do it.
I would hope so. I mean, I hope it sold well enough for them to go like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But real quick though, I gotta say this since you brought it up, and like this is the fourth time I'm saying this on the show, I think. But maybe we'll talk about this at another time. But Recess, dude, reminded me of like the Sandlot of cartoons.
Oh, yeah.
Sandlot was nostalgic to so many people as far as baseball, that time period. I think everybody's had that Recess moment.
Yeah.
So that was another great Saturday morning cartoon.
No, we'll definitely get into that because I love that show too.
That show was awesome.
It's a mixture of a couple of my favorite films, which is Stalag 17 and The Great Escape.
Yeah.
And just the music of it. Detweiler, TJ Detweiler, who was a Lawrence brother. He was the youngest Lawrence brother. And it was a great show.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of Hogan's Heroes in a way, too.
That, too. It was a combination of a lot of that. Like, whoever created that show loved old TV and old POW movies.
Yeah.
Like, they did. Cool. Like, it was just such a great thing. But again, you had a lot of original content at that time that was being created. And even if you had some of it was after the era of Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. This was mid to late 90s.
Yeah, this was before Y2K.
Yeah, and, the dialogue was tight, and there wasn't really anything corny about it. There was something just really tight about that show. But if we're going to go into that, we're going to go into like overtime.
Yeah.
We want to spend probably a whole episode talking about that because it was.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a terrific show.
It was a generational show. A lot of people. Okay, here's another one to compare it to. A lot of people said Doug was some sort of like.
I watched Doug. Yeah,
was like the Nickelodeon version of that.
Right.
To an extent, it gave you the neighborhood background, like the inner city neighborhood thing.
Recess was deeper though.
Yeah,
it was. There was so much subtle subtext. It was amazing. And as an adult and someone who loves classic film, and you and I grew up with a lot of those films. Like one of your favorite films is Cool Hand Luke, which I like to say is my favorite Christ movie. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. But
Christ ate a lot of eggs.
Right, I know, but his apostles are there. It's just it's a Christ movie.
Yeah.
But with Recess, again, Doug was great, but it was a great show. But with Recess, there were so many layers to it. And as a kid, there was no way. Even I grew up with old movies constantly because my mom's a huge film collector. And so I didn't even get a lot of that stuff. But now when I've done so much research on that show and the old films, I'm like, or when I watch the old movies, I go, that was in Recess. Or I watch Recess, I go, that was in that movie.
Yeah.
And you really understand how much they really put into that show, which makes you respect it all the more.
And one thing that got me out of that show real quick, I know we're going on a Recess tangent, but we'll save it for another one. But I'll just say this too. In that cartoon, it reminded me of Breakfast Club too.
Yeah.
Because you had the different characters, all genres, mixed races, characters you wouldn't see hanging out with each other, but respecting each other, treating each other right.
Yep.
After some conflict, everyone got along. And so it's like, you had, like you said, a little bit of everything, but it was brilliant. It was a brilliant show.
No, it really was. It really was. But even Rescue Rangers had a lot of that, not to the same level, but of the pop culture of the time. It was really a mirror of what was going on.
Yeah.
And they really did do that in the character design, the things, there's a lot of mafia villains in that one. And, you had great character actors that you were really familiar with. Corey Burton, Tress McNally, who Jim Cummings, who was great.
And a lot of things.
Peter Cullen, who was Optimus Prime. So, he was in that for a couple seasons as, as Monterey Jack. As Monterey Jack was played by different actors. Alan Oppenheimer, and you had a lot of great actors who you'll recognize their voice from other projects. But it had a great pedigree when it came to its cast. And it was also reflective of the time, which made it very popular with us. It's really well regarded enough for it to get an actual Blu-ray release from Disney directly. And that's kind of a feat in and of itself these days when Disney isn't as much about their home video department, especially when it comes to their old TV stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So there's something special about it.
One last thing I'll say on this one is I love the feel because it did hit a lot of, like you said, it reminded me a lot. There was a couple episodes that involved kidnapping, of other animals and they had to get them and stuff like that. And it reminded me of The Rescuers, another Disney cartoon.
Oh,
and I was like, dude, this is like Rescuers, but like lighthearted. Where that movie was dark.
It was
for its time.
70s.
The lady in that one scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
That had kidnapped the girl.
Yep.
So where they were dealing with like humans. Like the Rescue Rangers were in this animal type, DuckTales type,
I wonder if that was an evolution. They're like, how do we make the Rescuers, but like for a kid's show? And they're like,
I don't know.
I have to look into that. I want to see what the origins were if it's out there.
We should, because I remember the Rescue Rangers. I'm like, okay, this is a lighthearted version of the Rescuers.
Interesting.
Yeah, because that was a crazy movie, dude.
It was.
I mean, she had the pet alligator who was just ready to eat anything that came around.
And she lived on the swamp in the boat, right?
Yeah, in the bayou.
Bayou. That's right. That was a good one too. But yeah, I wonder if there's any connection there. But the truth of the matter is, I think that Rescue Rangers was an amalgam of so many things that shouldn't have worked, but they did.
But it did. Yeah.
That's the funny thing. It shouldn't have worked, but they have a
cocaine's a hell of a drug.
I'm telling you, these executives, man. A friend of mine was like a TV a writer. He wrote V the Final Battle in the 80s. He wrote a lot of movies, but he also wrote this show. And the one thing he developed, and they told him he was going to develop, was a cocaine habit. He goes, no. And he sure did. And he goes, yeah. He goes, they were right. Because it was a crazy time. And he was a writer in those miniseries at the same time that they were doing this show. So he knew. Yeah. And yeah, you're probably hitting the nail on the head, my friend. But hey, it worked out for us because we grew up loving it. It was a great show. We still have extremely fond memories of it, and obviously a lot of other shows that we're going to talk about. But Recess is going to be one definitely coming up. But I will say thank you so much again for tuning in. That's all the time we have for this set. Once again, I'm Ty Justice,
Todd Fox,
and we'll see you next time.